You are a decent guitar player, but as soon as your fingers have to stretch a little bit, nothing works anymore? Well, I was in this situation a couple of years ago, but today I'm going to show you the best exercises to stretch your fingers. Here we go. Hey Guitar Champion, what's going on? I'm Justin Hornbach, back from my practice dojo, and welcome to today's video. Being able to stretch your fingers is absolutely necessary if you want to avoid playing the same stupid 3-note per string scale run lick that you always play, and to spice up a little bit your playing. There are a few situations where we should be able to stretch our fingers. It doesn't matter if certain chords or certain arpeggios or even some interesting kind of exotic scale runs. But for the last 20 years I've seen a lot of students practicing the same exercise over and over and over again, and I always realized, like, hey, you are not actually practicing the right thing. You are practicing something, but it won't help you with your problem. So let's take a look on a few exercises that helped me a lot to stretch my fingers and to have fully control over what I'm doing here in my left hand, even in a stretched position. But before we begin, real quickly, if you want to have the tabs for all the licks that I've provided to you in this video, plus an extra video where I explain some of these licks more in detail, check the link in the description box. There you can download the tabs for free. But before we begin, we have to talk about a few things in our posture and how we hold and how we play the guitar that a lot of people are doing in the beginning, and these kind of things are often hindering people to achieve a proper stretch and to achieve a proper strength in your left hand and still a precision even though that you're stretching your hand. The first thing is how we hold the guitar with our left hand. In some old school classical guitar books, it's recommended to hold your fingers as parallel as possible to the fretboard. But that's actually one of the stupidest things that you can do in these kind of situations. You have to understand, fretting your fingers on the fretboard like this causes certain problems. Mostly it has to do with unnecessary consumption of energy by activating and tightening up muscles that you actually don't need in the default position. My biggest philosophy when it comes to guitar posture is to hold the guitar in our default position and being as relaxed as possible so that no muscle is activated. I talk about this here a lot on this channel so far with the right hand. We are now taking a closer look into the left hand. But if you want to have the full detail about what's going on in our left hand, what kind of muscles are getting activated when we're using certain joints and certain parts of the finger that are necessary to perform hammer-on and pull-off technique, then check out the ZEN of SPEEDPICKING Academy, my Patreon community. There I have uploaded a video for free, so you don't have to subscribe to this Patreon, everybody can watch it. It's a 20-minute long video where I share some of my recent discoveries and researches about what's actually going on in the left hand when we are playing fast licks. Highly recommend to check that out. Again, it's for free. Check the link in the description box that leads you straight to the ZEN of SPEEDPICKING Academy. And of course, if you want to have more licks, challenges, exercises, behind the scenes videos, and much more from me, then I would love to see you there and consider subscribing. But back to the posture. Why is this a bad way to hold the guitar? So we have little muscles here and here in our hand that are responsible for doing this motion. The flexion of the knuckle joints, the so-called MCP joints. And the muscles here on that side are also responsible for this motion here, for spreading our fingers. But there's another muscle that is responsible for doing this kind of stretch motion, and it's this muscle here, the so-called extensor digitorum muscle group. And now by trying to have our finger as parallel as possible to the fretboard, we have to rotate our hand inwards, the so-called supination, and by this rotation we are already activating this muscle. You can clearly feel it when you have your hands like this, which is the neutral position, and then when you rotate into this side you can feel how this muscle gets tightened up, gets tense, and gets activated. The terminology here could be a little bit misleading. Better way to say it is the muscle gets stretched. And whenever muscle is stretched, it is so much harder to get the right amount of power and the right amount of force out of that muscle that we need for a certain movement. So this means when we have this as our default position in our left hand, we are activating muscles before we are even playing a note. Unnecessary consumption of energy. So, and as you can see, when I have my fingers parallel to the fret, I can only nearly move my index finger here to the the 6th fret and the pinky to the 11th fret. You can feel it by yourself. Try to rotate your arm inwards so that the fingers are always parallel to the fret, and you feel a tension growing more and more appearing in your forearm. But when you have your fingers not like this, but more like this, you will feel how more and more relaxed your forearm will become. Now let's see how far I can stretch when I go into the neutral position. Let's remember, in this position where I have the fingers parallel to the fret, I only can reach with my index finger the 6th fret and with my pinky barely the 11th fret. Now in the neutral position, let me shake that off really quickly, I can stretch my index finger to the 5th fret and my pinky to the 11th fret. So I have a much wider range in my stretch, and I have way more strength than when I do it with a parallel position, where muscles getting activated unnecessary, where I only can do something like this. So don't have your fingers parallel to the fretboard, have it lined up in this kind of line. Test it for yourself and feel where certain muscles get activated when you use different postures on the left hand on the guitar. Now the next thing that we have to understand is that the guitar is built up in 4 axes. We have a vertical axis where we can line up the fingers like this. We have a horizontal axis where we can line up the fingers like this. We have the diagonal axis and the contra-diagonal axis. Now one exercise that a lot of people are showing me when it comes to stretching the fingers and to work on your finger stretches is this famous one from John Petrucci's Rock Discipline, where you play the diagonal axis and you more and more shift into the counter-diagonal axis, and then you stretch your fingers further away and going into the counter-diagonal axis. The problem with this exercise is it's only based on the diagonal and the counter-diagonal axis, and it's not necessarily based on the horizontal axis, where I would say 80% of our playing, especially in our style, is happening. So I recommend to stop going from these kind of exercises. These kind of exercises, they are fine. You can do them when you are in your first year of playing guitar. But as you might know, on my channel, I'm not the biggest fan of these exercises for everybody who is more into the intermediate range. So I would recommend to shift these kind of exercises more into a horizontal kind of exercise. And now we are talking about licks. So the first thing that I like to share to you is the so-called stretched pentatonic. It's a string skipping lick that we are right now performing on the A, the G and the E string. And for example, the first shape slowly goes like this. Here we already have a pretty big stretch between the index and the rest of the fingers. And yeah, of course, this right now is not necessarily the pentatonic. I'm more playing a kind of split up version of it. But what you can do is you can add, for example, tapping to it to make it the full pentatonic like this. In the link in the description box you can find the tabs for all the shapes and a full video where I explain all the shapes and go through them with you together. Now before we go into the next lick, I want to address another problem, that is the length of the fingers. I would say 80% of all of us, we have nearly the same, I would say, length in our hand, length in our fingers. I often hear that a lot of people are complaining like, oh, my fingers are too short, I cannot do any stretches, my fingers are too short. But I truly believe that these kind of problems can be fixed with the right posture and the right way how to hold the guitar. I mean, having long fingers are beneficial, of course. I mean, take a look on Paul Gilbert or that Australian guy, I don't remember his name right now, 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤, something like that. Really love that guy, but I cannot remember his goddamn name. But even the great Anton Opperin, for example, once told in the interview that I had with him on my channel that he actually has pretty small hands. Or take a look on Sean Lane. He also does not have the biggest hands and the biggest fingers, but he can also play a lot of really great stretches. So I give you another tip for the posture that is really important when we are playing our guitar. Don't try to have your guitar really close to the body like this. Because when we have our guitar really close to the body, you can see how my shoulders are getting back. My biceps and my triceps are getting activated. Certain muscles in my forearm are getting activated. Unnecessary consumption of energy. When I have the guitar like this, you know, that I have a little bit of space here between my fat belly and the guitar, it's like this, for example, around here. You have your arm in the perfect 90-degree posture to have the full capability of all the muscles now, and no muscle is unnecessarily activated, and you can easily play some wide and heavy stretches. And now let's move on to the next lick that I have for you. The next scale that I like to use to work on stretches and the individuality between the fingers is the so-called 4-note per string scale. For example, in A minor, it goes like this. The string scale is a pretty diagonal scale, and we have to face some really interesting shapes. Especially when we're starting on the root note of the low E string, on the A and on the D string we have to face this shape here, where we have to stretch, or where we have to separate our middle finger and our ring finger. We have to do this kind of grouping. And there's a reason why this kind of Spock shape here is quite difficult for our hand. And that's the next interesting thing about the hand and the finger is our middle finger. Even Chopin realized that the middle finger is the gravitas of our hand. This is the middle. To see when it comes to the extension and the flexion of our fingers, again certain muscles are activated, more about that in the free video in the ZEN of SWEEPING Patreon Academy, is that for these kind of movements, our ring finger and pinky, they are together, they're connected, and it's easier to move your index finger and your middle finger separately than your ring finger and your pinky separately. But when it comes to the so-called abduction, this one here, this movement here, it's all connected to the extensor digitorum, this muscle here. You can see pretty good how certain things are moving here, how the muscles are moving here when I do something like this. And yeah, again, when I do something like this as well. And as I mentioned, all the fingers, they are connected. And the middle finger, when I spread out the fingers, the middle finger is actually not moving. So moving the middle finger together with the other fingers contains more energy and more muscle work that we need from this muscle here. That's a really unusual kind of finger shape. Of course, something that we can train, but in the beginning, that's not easy. And I learned the 4-note per string scale when I had lessons with Rusty Cooley, who was really famous for playing the 4-note per string scale. So I believe when I would practice them a little bit more, they will become easier. But even though just playing them on a slower tempo, it really helped me to be more flexible with my fingers, because we're going through so many different kind of inversions and positions and kind of finger shapes in these kind of scales. And the next thing that helped me getting also the strength in my left hand, even though that I play some incredible stretches, is the diminished chord. You have to see, and I highly recommend to watch the free video on the Patreon channel, because it's related to this. And there, for example, I explain why the pull-off movement is quicker exhausted than the hammer-on movement. And it has, again, to do with this muscle, the same muscle that we use for spreading our fingers. So doing a descending movement while we have a stretch position, it's really not that easy, and therefore really helped me the 3-note per string diminished scale shape, which, for example, when we're starting on the 15th fret with our pinky, goes like this. And I really love that shape, not only for the purpose of our stretches, but also musically, because you can do so many sequences out of it, and it instantly will sound like Jeff Loomis, because he's, I would say, one of the more famous people who are using this kind of scale or this kind of shape a lot. So for example, you can play the so-called Taranto sequence from Stephen Taranto here on this shape. Speaking of the Taranto shape, just learning and practicing shapes and licks and patterns from modern guitar players like Stephen Taranto or Baxty helped me a lot to get more control in stretched positions, because I just, have to play them and have to practice them, and they are using some really incredible stretches, like for example this lick here. Another really famous passage, for example, that really helps for stretching your fingers is the final section of Scarified by Razor X. And if you know more sections that are really good for, getting a little bit of a stretch in your hands, then write it down in the comments. And now let's take a look on some of the best left-hand legato player that walked the earth and somebody with the most stretchiest fingers ever. Let's take a look on some chords that Allan Holdsworth played. Back when I studied jazz guitar, I came across a song by Allan Holdsworth called White Line, a really beautiful song from his first record, I O U. Highly recommend to check out that song and that record. And there in this song, he has like a little chord interlude in the middle of the song, which has really a lot of energy, and I really love this section. The chords are really beautiful, so I wanted to learn them. And you know, trying to learn them, I realized, oh, I have to work on my stretches, because these finger stretches, they can be really tough. Let's check out the chord progression. Ouch! Something like that. Really a super beautiful section, but really not easy to play. I mean, it helps when you have your guitar more up your body when it comes to chords. For example, there's a really great jazz guitar player and jazz guitar educator called John Stowell. I used to have lessons with him, really great guitar player, and he's playing his guitar really like this. And of course, by playing the guitar like this, you have so much more of a wider range in all the 4 axes. Speaking of the axis, I mean, so far the licks that we have are on the horizontal axis. That Allan Holdsworth kind of chord thing is a little bit more in the counter diagonal axis. But what also helps for me, especially then later for having more of stability and more individuality of the finger movement, were drop 2 and 4 chords. I will not explain you right now what drop 2 and 4 chords are. It's a little bit complicated, but for example, it looked like this. This is C major, drop 2 and 4. A really beautiful chord. I absolutely love that chord. It really helps to gain strength in flexed fingers, in extended fingers, and all with a stretch. Now, of course, you can do this as well as minor. There you have a little bit of more stretch between the index, the middle, and the ring and the pinky as the groupings. Or even minor 7 flat 5, which is even more kind of a stretch. So really beautiful chords that you can use to, yeah, not only outline some really cool chord progressions, like for example, I love to do like C major 7, drop 2 and 4 voicing, and then going to E flat major 7, drop 2 and 4 voicing. Absolutely love that. Going back, maybe to A major 7. I love this kind of voicing. But super cool as well for your stretches. And so much about today's video and today's lick on how I learned to get more strength, more precision, more speed and more accuracy in a stretched position. Again, I highly recommend to check out the Biomechanics of Speed Part 1 video on my Patreon. It's for free, just check the link there. You will instantly redirect to the Patreon page, and there I hope I'm going to see you next time. Of course, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, leave a like. I can't wait to see you in my next video. Cheers and power your progress.